This is me. I mean, Kin Kinnon is a really far right winger who has a black husband. Tell something about our political spectrum. Invite Zanna Marine on the broadcast. It would be sick. I would love to have her on the broadcast. Okay, let's get back to this. Or we already did this. Did we finish the Finnish prison? Oh, we were going to look at Australia's mass shooting problem. And then we got into America's like prison population, America's carceral state. All right, let's see what happened in Australia. Let's get back. Let's leave Finland for a little bit and look at a country that is incredibly similar to the United States of America as a penal colony, a genocidal penal colony, and how they chose to deal with the exact same kind of gun violence problem that they had. And then after that, we'll go and look at the fucking Lauren Boebert stuff. Like, was she actually a sugar daddy or sugar mommy or a sugar baby?
Defined by starkness. Evoking images of the New World and mirroring the process of Western expansion, European settlers arrived on an untamed continent pushed across.
Dude, this is. Remember when I banned a chatter permanently for saying this? Like, this is not funny, dude. I mean, Brandon's set is funny, but saying, dude, it's about you is not funny. Like, I hope you understand that. Like, I'm in a good ass mood, and the first thing you do is literally come in and go, "Oh my god, dude, take a week off. Fuck your MyBee."
Vast wilderness through hostile indigenous populations and established, then doggedly defended, a few narrow bands of civilization. As the years rolled forward, cascading sequences of gold rushes and increasing need for agricultural output pulled Australian society further.
Remember when you were pro-Putin for bringing this up? Some Biden admin officials are now privately expressing concern that rather than dissuading Russia as intended, the sanctions are instead exacerbating inflation, worsening food insecurity, and punishing ordinary Russians more than Putin and his allies. Yeah.
Further from the convenience.
We're going to start this again.
Australia is a nation defined by starkness. Evoking images of the New World and mirroring the process of Western expansion, European settlers arrived on an untamed continent pushed across vast wilderness through hostile indigenous populations and established, then doggedly defended, a few narrow bands of.
Bro, this is literally like justifiable. This is like a little bit too much, genocide, not denialism, but like worse, supporting genocide kind of. I'm sure Wendover didn't intend to mean it like that, but it does seem a lot like, the same American Manifest Destiny, pro fucking genocide attitude.
Civilization. As the years rolled forward, cascading sequences of gold rushes and increasing need for agricultural output pulled Australian society further from the convenient natural harbors where it began. With man and beast continuously working to reclaim the land they usurped, the increasingly small and informal groups of settlers on the frontier relied on their more advanced weaponry to maintain their foothold. Guns matured into a standard-issue piece of kit for those straying beyond the established towns. A century on, that reality remained. 20th century Australians continued to leave the comfortable confines of coastal cities in hope of transforming rural land into a living. Those that found themselves in this less urban life, in turn, inherited a unique culture and identity framed around individualism and rugged self-reliance. These individuals were proud of their lifestyle, providing for their families and nation through what they helped pull from the earth. Yet, even as technology advanced, nature proved unruly and so rural Australians continue to rely on their weaponry to defend their crops or livestock or minerals from the other. Among this population, guns had become conflated with culture. They were important tools, they were pest control, they were family...
I mean, it's great. He is making a comparison to America, one that I make so regularly, and talking about how dumb fuck Americans and dumb fuck Australians come from the same fucking penal colony attitude, genocidal penal colony attitude, only to, I assume, show that a better tomorrow is possible for the dumb fuck Americans, kind of like the dumb fuck Australians did.
Heirlooms, they were security. But as urban Australia continued to develop alongside rural Australia, guns in cities and suburbs began to seem superfluous. Tools no longer worth the inherent risk of operating, and in untrained or uncertain hands, potential disasters. All the while, as this rift widened, the weapons grew more effective. The destructive potential of a minute shrunk down to a second. What was once but a cultural difference morphed into an issue. Should personal gun ownership be allowed? Was the necessity of some stronger than the risk to most, as the potential for misuse grew in step with technological development? As the century progressed, as the cosmopolitan and countryside continued to drift apart, the issue escalated, and the questions informing the issue begged for an answer. Australia's gun debate, informed by history, landscape, and legacy, intensified by growing urban-rural divide and the technology's ruthless efficiency, was at an impasse. As one exasperated New South Wales politician voiced after a futile national gun summit in 1987, quote, "It will take a massacre in Tasmania before we get gun reform in Australia." Nearly a decade later, his words proved prophetic. It was just after 1 in the afternoon on the 28th of April, 1996, when a 28-year-old man in a yellow Volvo entered the Port Arthur historic site. Carrying what security described as a sports-type bag through the tourist-laden formal penal colony, the man entered a busy cafe, ate a meal, then opened fire on unsuspecting tourists. Within just 90 seconds, the gunman had killed 20 people with 29 bullets. Leaving the cafe, the shooting then continued onto the streets. By the time of his capture the following day, the gunman had killed 35 and injured another 23. In the hands of the murderer throughout his rampage was a semi-automatic Colt AR-15, a weapon that, under Tasmania's uniquely hands-off gun laws, was available for purchase without a license. All told, it was the worst mass shooting in the nation's history, and while perpetrated in a far corner of the country, the sheer depravity rocked Australia to its core.
That's crazy. Does that sound familiar? Now, I'm sure they fucking turned around and said, "Mate, what we really need is to make sure all tourists have a fucking AR-15 too, so they can fire back." What they needed was a fucking good guy, a good fucking bloke with a gun, right? That's what they fucking needed. And then another mass shooting happened next week, and they were like, "Well, what we fucking need is more God and more fucking, thoughts and fucking prayers, mate. Why are you making this fucking political?" That's what the Bogans said. And then another week happened where there's another mass shooting, and another mass shooting, and another mass shooting, and another mass shooting, and then there was like 2 mass shootings a day. Ultimately coming to 2 mass shootings a day where they were saying, like, we need to fucking militarize the police further. And we need to make sure that we don't fucking hurt the Bobby's fucking feelings. That's the reason why they're not doing a good job, you sick cunts. And then more mass shootings kept happening. And at a point where, Australia had more guns than it had people. And the most popular gun was the one that they just showed, right? And then finally they arrived at fucking door control, mate. That's what we fucking need to do. We need to do door control, mate. And that's where they're at now, right? Like that's what's going on. Don't say Bobby used coppers. Oh, Bobby is British. Sorry, coppers. Fucking copper dogs. We need to make sure that shrimps are on the fucking barbie and AR-15s are in the hands of every fucking baby. That's right. We need a fucking VB long neck and an AR-15 to defend ourselves against the fucking emus. And then, yeah, politicians would go up and say, Politicians would go on television and say, like, you know, we need fucking AR-15s to shoot against the fucking untamed emus. It's just a mental health problem, mate. Prawns on the fucking barbie. It's prawns, not shrimps. Okay.
For a moment, the shocked nation stammered. Then it began to move. While the Port Arthur shooting was Australia's largest, it was far from the country's first. The Hoddle Street killings and the Queen Street massacre, just months apart in Melbourne in 1987, had set the backdrop for that year's ultimately fruitless National Gun Summit. The gun violence continued into the new decade too, with one or more shootings in 1990, 91, 92, and 93. In 10 years, Australia experienced 12 mass shootings, abruptly ending the lives of 98 people.
That's wild, bro. 10 or 12? 12 is like 12 mass shootings is less mass shootings that happen over the course of Memorial Day weekend. 98 is less deaths in mass shootings than the number of people that died, 187, over the course of Memorial Day weekend. That's a 3-day weekend in America where we doubled the number of fucking murders that occurred, gun murders that occurred. That's wild.
While gun ownership was common across the nation's history, the increase in mass shootings and the high firearm death rate of 2.84 per 100,000 people, well above England's rate of 0.42 per 100,000, were becoming
These fucking pussies had 10 mass shootings over the course, or 12 mass shootings over the course of 10 years, and we're like, we need to do something about this, mate. These sick cunts, these proper cunts, these shit cunts, they're getting their fucking hands on AR-15s and they're shooting up motherfuckers. And meanwhile in America, that's like literally, that's not even a thing. That's like weekend numbers, okay? Long weekend numbers.
Too much for most Australians to bear. By 1996, punctuated by the most horrific shooting of them all.
Chat laughing at the lack of mass shootings, fucking psychos. What should we do? If you're an American, what can you do but laugh? You can't fucking solve it, okay? So yeah, of course we're gonna laugh. We're gonna look at a country that, you know, actually did the right thing, and we're gonna laugh about it because we're broken.
All Australians had had enough. In a poll run days after the Port Arthur massacre, 90% of the 2,058 respondents supported a national ban on automatic and semi-automatic firearms, and 88% supported registration requirements for all firearms. Simply put, average, everyday Australians were ready for change.
I don't understand. Did they arm the teachers like we just did in Ohio? Or Florida in the aftermath of Parkland? They must have, right? That's what countries normally are supposed to do, right? Like a mass shooting happens and you're like, oh, the problem is not enough people had the guns. That's what the problem was, actually.
But popular public attitudes won't move policy alone. A fundamental restructuring of Australian gun laws was anything but a foregone conclusion in the wake of Port Arthur. Any attempt at sweeping change would have to navigate around the country's powerful gun lobby, a vocal and impassioned minority of rural Australians wary of government overreach, and the fact that gun policy was governed not by the federal government, but
Wait, is this actually the N-word, like, for real? Does Australia actually just straight up have, like, an entire part of... Why is that a thing? They replaced them in 2020 or so? Wait, what? What the fuck? Bro, what the fuck, dude? Oh, god damn it, dude. Australia, dude. I mean, remember when we learned about the White Australia policy? Not that surprising when you think about it.
by states. And yet, the day after the shooting, John Howard, Australia's Prime Minister for all of 48 days, announced his effort to push through major gun law reform. Howard and his coalition government had ample room to cop out, to throw their hands up and say it was a state-level issue. Instead, they pushed on. As he later reflected, quote, "You never let a good crisis go to waste. Tragic though the event was, it gave us an opportunity to do something in the wake of it so that those lives were not lost in vain." In the days that followed, cabinet meetings pored over studies pulled together by non-governmental groups like the Coalition for Gun Control and previously internally produced policy recommendations that followed the Melbourne shootings. Outside of cabinet meetings, Howard urged representatives from his coalition of Liberal and National Party members to stand with him. But as Howard applied pressure on conservatives representing rural Australia, so too did the nation's gun lobby, which organized marches, street demonstrations, and speeches. Ultimately, the lobby's mobilization proved detrimental to its own cause, as arguments made in media that 99.9% of gun owners abide by the law, for example, gave way to high-profile figures like the vice president of the Firearm Owners Association threatening bloodshed if stricter regulations went through. In less than a week after the Port Arthur massacre, the political determination emanating from Parliament had resulted in a cabinet agreement on a prohibition on automatic rifles, semi-automatic rifles, and pump-action shotguns.
Wow, that's crazy that they did that. That's crazy that the fucking gun rights guys, the gun nuts in Australia, also threatened with bloodshed. And then the Australian government basically was like, "With what guns, mate? We're taking them away! We're fucking taking them away from you, you dumb cunt!"
The creation of a national firearm registration system and a compensation fund for a gun buyback program. 4 days later, on May 10th, the Prime Minister hosted the police ministers from all states and territories to present the 10-point plan that soon informed the nation's first set of universal gun laws, what would be known as the National Firearms Agreement. Even with broad public support, the NFA was hard-won. Queensland, the Northern Territory, and Western Australia refused to agree to the NFA for months and pushed for semi-automatics to remain legal as long as they were crimped or modified to carry limited rounds. Only after Howard threatened to expand federal power did they join the nationwide program. In some places, the NFA was bitterly resented. During speaking tours intended to explain and promote the program, Deputy Prime Minister Tim Fischer was burned in effigy in the Queensland state of Gympie, while Prime Minister Howard donned a bulletproof vest when speaking in Sale, Victoria. With all states and territories signed on by the middle of 1996, the agreement flipped Australia's loose, decentralized gun laws on their head. What was once a system so scant that a law student reading through
Yes, they were doing Nazi salute. Chill.
gun statutes thought there were pages missing had suddenly become one of the world's most thorough. Every gun and gun sale
No, motherfucker. I'm unfazed by seeing Nazi salutes, okay? Like, what do you want me to do? We just arrested like 30 fucking potato Nazis in Idaho. Like that. Okay? There was like 30 Nazis that were ready to fucking beat the shit out of unsuspecting gay people. Like, what do you want me to do? Should I be shocked? You know what I mean? Like, that's like everyday existence in America, you know? That's like, oh man, Nazis, that's crazy.
now had to be recorded in a national registry. Anyone who owned or sought to own a gun needed to prove they had a genuine reason. Crucially, in the eyes of Australian policymakers, self-defense was not one. Semi-automatic rifles and shotguns were now banned except for when a farmer or professional shooter could prove genuine reason. Gun owners now needed to be 18 or older, needed to pass a safety course, and had to abide by strict gun storage rules.
That's crazy, dude. Remember John Cornyn earlier today? Remember what we were talking about earlier today with our brave and bold Texas Senator John Cornyn? What did he say? Oh, yeah. Here are the ideas that he fucking rejected and was celebrating. Universal background checks, assault weapons bans, mandatory waiting period. Oh, wait, which one was that? Oh, yeah, that's right. The unconstitutional mandatory safe storage requirements for all firearms in home. Thank God we didn't put that in there.
And if in possession of a newly prohibited gun, Australians now had 12 months to surrender it and receive fair compensation funded by a one-time Medicare levy. A year later, Australia had confiscated and destroyed 650,000 guns, and it did so under budget.
No, look at all those fucking guns, mate. Those are all good guns going to fucking waste, mate. What are you fucking doing then? Armed and Orthodox, the tactical rabbi. Love that. We'll look at that in a little bit. That's America.
As the project cost Australian taxpayers around $360 million. So, did it work? Did the sweeping, disruptive reforms of the National Firearms Agreement actually save lives? Well, in the decade leading up to the Port Arthur massacre, the country experienced 12 shootings with at least 4 fatal victims, totaling 98 individuals killed. In the decade after the Port Arthur massacre, Australia experienced none. In fact, in the 26 years since, there have been only 3 mass shootings with
I don't know. Did it work? I don't know.
total of 12 victims. Proponents point to this as the conclusive piece of evidence that Australia's gun restrictions were a masterstroke of public policy, a single maneuver that solved a massive, deadly problem. But others are quick to point out that mass shootings are a relatively rare event. Even during Australia's most notorious and deadly decade of shootings, they occurred just over once a year. While undoubtedly tragic on a human level, from a statistical standpoint, this frequency instills relatively low confidence in any observed trend. The confidence is lowered yet further when glancing back another decade. From 1976 to
Bro, rare according to what? Like, yeah, if you're American, if you're literally American, yeah, you look at Australia and go, well, you know, that's kind of rare there to begin with. But like for any other country, is it rare to have like 10 over the course of fucking 12 years? Like, I don't know. What?
to 1986, there were just 2 shootings with 10 total victims. So was the 10 years starting in 96 the deviation from the trend, or was it the 10 years starting in 86? Especially in the context of mass shootings, where shooters get inspired by shooters who get inspired by shooters, was there simply a spate of violence followed by a regression to the mean? To determine this, one can substitute this low frequency statistic for a higher frequency equivalent. The more data points, the more one can be confident in causation over mere correlation. While the National Firearms Agreement was implemented in response to a mass shooting, it was concurrently designed to address all types of gun violence. So Australia's overall
You have to look at like the rate of gun ownership and what kind of guns they have. Yeah, I mean, shooters are inspired by other shooters, but like even if shooters are inspired by other shooters, they took broad sweeping legislation and like stopped it regardless of the inspiration. It's not like shooters were like, all right, fuck it. Like I'm no longer inspired by other shootings. You know what I mean? Like even if it's literally just like shooters are inspired by other shooters actually. Okay, so what made them stop being inspired?
firearm mortality rate can be used as a proxy.
Aussies didn't have to work around the Constitution though. Dude, what the fuck are you talking about? That is a lie, dude. That's a fucking fabrication. It's a piece of paper you can wipe your ass with. What do you mean? It's so silly. We're like adults, man. We're adults. We're having a conversation with adults, okay? I'm sorry. It's not a fucking Disney movie, okay? Well, what do you... Oh, the Constitution that we got to work on. Like, fuck the Constitution. The Constitution can suck my dick. The Founding Fathers can suck my cock from behind, okay?
Proxy metric in examining the policy's effectiveness. In 1996, the year of the Port Arthur massacre, this rate sat at 2.84 gun deaths per year per 100,000 people. Today, it's just 0.9. A threefold drop in less than 3 decades surely proves that gun control curbed gun violence, but some are quick to respond that trends don't mean anything in isolation. Glancing backwards, firearm fatality in Australia was already on the decline, and the drop from 2.84 was just a continuation of the drop from 4.7. Prior to 1996, according to research led by gun policy expert Philip Alpers, the rate of decline was an average of 3% a year. Post 1996, however, it accelerated to 4.9, a meaningful, measurable, near doubling in rate right after the most significant gun policy reform in decades. Now, while certainly stronger, there are still potentially holes in this proof. One could, and some have argued, that this too could be random chance, that the rate of decline had the option of staying the same, or decelerating, or accelerating post 1996, and it just so happened that the third option occurred. But there is yet another method of establishing causality, a method that has real-world, practical evidence behind its effectiveness. It's called rare event predictive modeling. You see, predictive modeling for common events is fairly straightforward. A streaming service like Netflix, for example, will use troves of data to build out a model for how long it expects a given customer to stick around based on factors like their age, home address, gender, and more. This model is useful since if the company learns that a given sign-up in Illinois, for example, stays subscribed on average 4 months longer than a given customer from Massachusetts, the company can afford to spend more marketing to those Illinois-based customers since their lifetime value is higher. Netflix and others rely on the sheer quantity of data points to build out highly specific, highly accurate models like this. The rarer an event becomes, though, the tougher it is to build out an accurate predictive model.
It does read like an ad. I don't think it is, though.
And the reason why it's not impossible is because time and money have been poured into developing and validating predictive models for rare events, thanks to the massive industry it makes possible: insurance. How the insurance industry works is simple. Individuals are way more afraid of having a 1 in 10,000.
To be fair, this nerd shit ain't gonna convince anyone. Yes, the nerd shit ain't gonna convince anyone. I think he's just making this video for like data nerds. People who are like, actually, pure statistical analysis without any without factoring in like material conditions and all of the other externalities is the only way to comprehend whether or not something has a causal factor. Okay. It's just for the Redditors, exactly. I think that's just what that's just what it's for the record. It's for nerds.
Chance of having their home robbed and having to spend $100,000 to replace things than having a 1 in 10 chance of breaking their microwave and having to spend $100. That's despite the fact that in either scenario, the average person is going to be out $10 either way.
Not being educated is good, actually, didn't you know? Wait, what? Are you making a joke about me? Because I would go so far as to say that an analysis that goes beyond like purely looking at the data will probably be better at revealing the truth of what happened. Because you can be lied to by numbers. Which, by the way, that is if I assume that he's going to make a gun control argument here instead of basically saying, like, gun control is not what saved Australia. Are the FBI crime facts sheet also lies? You most likely are saying this in an incredibly racist manner, but yes, it is actually a perfect example of how data can lie. Yeah. Not racist, but people always use it. Yes, that's a great example. Yes. FBI crime data is a perfect example of this, actually. Thank you for bringing it up, Anime PFP, viciously named Orc Tamer. 1350 is a constant cyclical argument used by racist pieces of shit to imply that black people need extra policing, that black people are actually more violent. Why? Because 13%, they make up 13% of the population, but are responsible for 50% of the crimes, right? According to FBI data. Now, if you leave it like that, you're like, well, that makes, if you leave it like that, and then also on top of that, you have, already like a predisposition towards being racist because you grew up in a racist society and in a racist environment, then you're going to agree with it and you're going to repeat it over and over again. However, if you actually look at that data, you will recognize that one, that's not even conviction rates. It's just arrest numbers, okay, which hardly constitutes conviction. So there's that. And that conviction, or not conviction, but arrest rates are higher for black people because black people are over-policed. And the data point is used to justify over-policing black communities, ironically. Now, a couple things to consider in this situation is this. Men ultimately are not over-policed. White men in general are overrepresented in pedophile data, right? White men are more, white men are responsible for a higher percentage of acts of sexual violence against children than any other group, and yet you don't actually fucking over-police white men specifically with respect to pedophilia. Why? Because it can be seen as a multifaceted problem, a complex one. Okay? And no one would ever make that argument because, once again, it's the dominant in-group. You only make an argument like that against a marginalized group of individuals. So there is that. Two, black men, for example, or black people in general, for example, are 4 times likely to be arrested and also get longer sentences for drug crimes like consumption or even minor possession charges than white men are, despite the fact that white people use drugs at the same exact rate as black people do. This kind of sentencing disparity is controlled for all other factors, by the way. Control for all other factors, and you still have this sentencing disparity. Why is that a thing? Well, that's because we have a racist criminal justice system. So, in a situation like that, of course, a 1350 number like that is grossly oversimplified, reductive, and serves a very racist purpose. If you're a racist person, you listen to that and you go, yep, that makes sense to me. If you're not a racist person, you will perhaps do better and recognize that it's more complicated than that. This is a great example, so thank you for bringing it up. The 1350 example is great. It's a great example of how data can lie to you, especially when it corresponds to your systemic biases, your socially conditioned, preconceived biases. Your conclusions are based on the same data. The people saying 1350 are the ones lying. Yeah. But there you go. That's how you can fucking look at data and just interpret it without understanding it. And therefore doing a racism. Let's get back to it.
$100,000 divided by 10,000 is $10, and so is $100 divided by 10. While in isolation illogical, this bias is in reality pragmatic, since far more people can weather a $100 expense than a $100,000 one without going into debt and financial hardship. Therefore, what insurance does is aggregate 10,000 people with that 1 in 10,000 chance together and charge them each $10 so that the one of them that does get robbed doesn't go into financial ruin. Except they don't really charge them $10. They charge them, say, $11 so that they can turn a profit, but in order to do this, they need to determine what the likelihood of a given individual getting robbed is. And again, the events that insurance companies insure against are by their very nature rare because those are the ones people are worried about. Therefore, insurers need to take in a minuscule number of data points and build a predictive model based on them. If they do it wrong and consider home robberies more common than reality, they'll overcharge and a competitor will come in, undercut their prices, and capture all their customers. If they consider it less likely than reality, they'll run out of money from paying out more to robbed customers than they take in. Without diving into the mind-numbing mathematics behind rare event predictive modeling, the proof that it works is that the insurance industry exists. The proof is that these companies can only make a profit if they've accurately predicted the commonality of events as rare and unlikely as sinkholes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, missile attacks, plane crashes, bear attacks, and more, damaging and destroying homes. The same rare event predictive modeling techniques were applied in research led by Simon Chapman of the University of Sydney's School of Public Health. He and his co-researchers looked at the data on Australian shootings in the same way an insurer would and built a rare events predictive model that indicated between
The moment, dude, this motherfucker's like explaining actuarial sciences and shit to like literally actuarial. Oh yeah, the camera's still incredibly large from when I was making the argument earlier. To describe, oh Jesus Christ, this is for all the fucking STEM lords in the chat.
Between 1996 and 2018, when the study was conducted, there should have been 16.3 mass shootings in the country, with a minimum of 65 fatal victims. In reality, there were just 2. Building on that baseline, the researchers were able to calculate the likelihood that this trend could be explained simply by random chance, that the rarity of mass shootings meant that their 22-year absence was merely a data anomaly. The answer was 1 in 200,000. That's to say, there's a chance that the absence in mass shootings in Australia post-1996 was caused by the natural ebb and flow in their occurrence, but that chance is 1 in 200,000. Meanwhile, there's a 199,999 in 200,000 chance that something other than random chance is behind the trend. Something like the implementation of the most significant gun control measures in the country's history. One can't ever outright 100% prove a link between 2 separate occurrences in the real world. This is why people say that correlation does not imply causation. If you asked a data scientist to prove that flipping your light switch led to your light turning off, they tell you that there's a chance that the light was on a timer scheduled to switch off at that moment regardless. Or that there's a chance that the research assistant tasked with collecting data about switch flips and light illumination was being bribed to make them look more correlated than reality. Or that there's a chance that the light wasn't real in the first place and was just a hologram made to make you think it was turning off in time with the switch. These are all unlikely, but technically not impossible. In a world of infinite possibility, one can always find another genuinely possible cause for a given outcome. The data scientists will always tell.
This is why I hate debate perverts, by the way, because like to prove your work takes 1 second to ask and 7 hours to fucking complete. And the person who always asks you to prove your work is never even interested in changing their mind or cares about how you prove your work. That's why I hate debate perverts. It's so easy to fucking derail and just be like, actually prove your work. What if it was what if the light switch turned on because of a consequence of holograms? Like they literally, that's a thing. You can technically say that. What he's saying is that data scientists are annoying. No, dude, most data scientists don't operate this way, okay? But debate perverts do operate this way because their entire purpose is to fucking derail.
Tell you there's a 1 in a lot chance that
Especially because then they turn around and go, especially when they turn around, this is not how you do stats, by the way. You don't justify foundation statistics every time you come up with the result. Yeah, I know, but in order to justify it, the fucking weirdos, you have to. Debate perverts. And the ultimate thing is that like a debate pervert could still turn around and say something along the lines of, well, you didn't say it was impossible. Technically, a 1 in 200,000 chance of it occurring as a random happenstance is still likely. So sorry, you don't convince me.
that something other than flipping the switch led to the light turning off. But probably not. It probably wasn't any of that. Flipping the light switch.
It's not that the rail, though, is to reach a sound conclusion. If scientists didn't do this, we would have no good science existing. Dude, you're not a scientist. The people that do this in this Twitch chat are not scientists, and they're not trying to arrive at the truth. I already showed you that like their ultimate goal is to derail. You're doing it right now. You're literally doing it right now. You're like unable to fucking stop it.
Which probably led to the light turning off. In every way, it's tough to make videos about subjects with the weight and tragic significance of this one. From word choice and motion graphics to visuals, and a close reading of YouTube's content guidelines, we have to put a lot of thought into how to cover and visualize this story. Thankfully,
Get it? He's gonna do an ad break. Username is just chill, doesn't actually chill. Yeah, I know. All right, let's watch this.
The job
Tactical
of